The movie starts, and we see a car on the side of the road with its driver's door open. Another car passes by it, and we see the inside of that passing car. We see a family talking to each other while driving. They go past a speed detector, and the cop stops them for speeding. Then the man, Alan, gets to the passenger side and the woman, Jill, starts driving. She tells the kids to stop arguing and throws the phone Alan's playing games into the glove box. Then we see them stop by a gas station and buy some food. They go back to the road and start singing. They finally arrive at a riverbank. They get out, take their bags and start hiking. One of the kids, Micah, notices two men on top of one of the mountains. One of the men waves at her and they go away. They reach the top and take a picture. Then we see them by the riverbank again, having a picnic. Jill notices the two men approaching them while they were talking and tells Alan. One of them, Tubbs, goes to them right away and starts looking around for food without talking. The other one, Mandrake, starts talking to them while they look on edge and scared. Mandrake asks for their names and they introduce themselves to him. He then turns his back to them and continues to talk about privacy and how no one can hear them. They hear a sound of a gun, and the parents tell the kids to calm down. Mandrake asks if they are interested in the gun, and points it towards the kids. Alan tries to get up, telling him to stay away, but Mandrake stops him. He says it'll be fine as long as they do what they are supposed to do. Jill asks what he wants, and Mandrake starts talking about their car. Jill throws him the keys, and Mandrake asks for their money. They get everything out of their pockets, and he tells them to lay on the ground and face the other way. Jordan, the other kid, hears a sound coming from the gun and gets scared, calls Alan Hoagie. Mandrake asks what that was, and Alan says it's his nickname. Mandrake looks at Alan's wallet and finds his ID card. He tells him to turn around, and starts laughing when he looks at his face. He says that he knows a hoagie, and there probably isn't much in there. Then Tubbs tells him that there are visitors, and we see a white minibus on the other side. He tells them to get up and do not make a move. They start staring at the minibus until it turns around to leave. He tells them to wave, and the driver waves back to them. Mandrake says that will probably be the time where they wish that they had done something, when they remember all of this. He stands still for some moments, then he gets his gun and shoots Micah and Jordan. Jill runs at them, but Mandrake hits her with the gun. Tubbs stops Alan, and he drops him to the ground, breaking his arm. Mandrake starts talking to Tubbs, and tells him to get the children somewhere else. We see Tubbs doing something by the river, and we see tattoos on his body. We see Alan crying while hugging Jill. Tubbs brings the car, and Mandrake tells him to sit at the back with Alan. He'll drive. Tubbs looks annoyed but does it. They make Jill sit in the passenger seat, with Tubbs sitting in the back with Alan. Alan asks where he's taking them, and Mandrake says they're going home. They get to the main road, and Mandrake starts asking Alan questions about his job. Alan doesn't answer any of it, and he tells him it's not good to not answer the driver. Alan asks how he knew his job, and Mandrake says that he told him, but he probably doesn't remember because of the shock of it all. Jill wakes up when they're talking. She looks around and asks where the kids are, and starts crying. Alan tries to calm her, while Mandrake talks to her and makes her get even more sad. They see a car coming from the opposite direction, and signal at them. They go past some police cars, but they don't stop them. Mandrake tries to talk to Jill, but Alan answers instead. He learns that they are both teachers, then asks Alan where he was working. He keeps asking where was he working before there, and Alan asks when he was there. Mandrake asks where's he talking about, and Alan says in Hackaway Point. Tubbs turns to Alan and starts looking at him. Mandrake asks him questions, and Alan says he was there for a short time and he didn't see anything. Mandrake asks what would happen if he did, and Alan says there's no need to talk about what didn't happen. Mandrake lists some names, and Alan says it's been a long time, and he doesn't remember anything, while Jill looks at them, trying to understand what's happening. He says he was there to help, and Mandrake asks Tubbs if he received any help. Tubbs continues to look at Alan, angry. Alan asks Mandrake which wing he was in. Mandrake asks if he was familiar to him and they argue about it. Jill stops them, and asks if this was all for a grudge, and tells Mandrake that she hopes bad things happen to him there. Mandrake looks at her and starts laughing. Alan manages to go to the toilet at the gas station that they stopped at before. He looks around and finds a loose nail. He gets it out, and starts writing a note on the toilet lid with it. He gets out and sees Mandrake in front of the door, waiting for him. He tells the man working in there that there's no toilet paper, and the man says he looks like he has been in a war since the morning. Alan uses this as an opportunity to tell him where he was, and Mandrake notices this. He says that's not what happened, and forces him to tell the truth. Alan uses this as another opportunity to say that they were in the riverbank, and they get out. Alan hits the door to his broken arm purposely and falls to his knees, putting the nail in the tire. Mandrake drives off, but turns back and comes to the gas station again. He says he needs to buy cigarettes and gets out. Then we hear the man who's working at the gas station screaming and yelling for help. He gets out, and Mandrake follows him, then shoots him. He carries his body inside, while Jill and Alan watch him. Alan pushes himself against Tubbs and tells Jill to run. Tubbs gets out and runs behind Jill. Mandrake follows them, and Alan gets the phone from the glove box. Mandrake comes in and breaks it. He gets to the driver's side and starts diving towards where Jill and Tubbs are. They get her in the car and start driving again. Mandrake throws the name tag of the man to Alan. Jill says Alan wasn't one of them, He would never do that. They argue, and Alan asks what his problem is with him. He says that Jill has nothing to do with any of this, and asks him to let her go. He says that he'll do whatever they want. Mandrake says they weren't looking for them, it was a coincidence. It was just business as usual. Alan throws the name tag back and they look at him. Then we see Mandrake driving recklessly, and he goes and stops under a bridge. He gets Jill out, and Alan runs behind them. Tubbs stops him, and Mandrake pressures Alan to talk. Alan finally admits that he saw bad things. He starts talking about the things they did to the children. Mandrake tells him to tell it all to Jill. Alan looks at her and continues to tell. Mandrake asks him to talk about himself. Alan continues to talk about them and says that they would line up the kids. Mandrake asks him what that means a couple of times, and he asks if he ever did it. Alan says no, but he asks if he's sure. Alan says he did it once. He starts talking about a kid who tattooed himself. He describes the tattoo, and it's the same tattoo as the one on Tubbs's arm. He continues to tell what happened to that child. He says that one of them asked for a wire brush and told him to scrub it off. The kid refused to do it, so the man did it himself. Alan says he didn't do anything, he just stood there and watched. Mandrake asks him what he could have done. Alan says it's the past and to leave it there. Jill and Alan cry while Mandrake starts talking. He says it was a good story, but the details matter. He says it wasn't a wire brush, it was nylon. He tells Alan that he's lying, and Alan asks him to let Jill go. Mandrake looks at the sky, sees the stars and starts to talk about his past. Then we see glimpses of kids in Hackaway Point. We see one of them engraving "I hate this place" on a stone. We see them back at the car, and Mandrake asks Jill if anything seems different from before now. Jill says she always knew there was something. She could see it in his eyes. She tells Alan that there's a difference between doing something and letting it happen, but they are not far away from each other. Then she asks Mandrake if he's satisfied and opens the car door, throws herself out. Mandrake stops the car and they all get out. Alan tries to run behind Jill, but Tubbs stops him. Mandrake slowly walks towards her while Jill crawls to the bridge and throws herself off of it. Alan starts screaming and crying. They drive off again. Mandrake asks Alan if he ever read Frankenstein, and Alan says he misunderstood the story, he didn't create him. Then the tire blows out, and Mandrake manages to stop before hitting a tree. They get out, get Alan out from the trunk and start changing it. A car approaches them, and Mandrake closes all the doors. They ask if they need any help, and Mandrake kindly sends them off. Alan kicks the door, and Tubbs falls to the ground. He runs to the woods. Mandrake gets his gun and runs behind him. Alan gets caught in something and starts rolling down a hill. He hits a tree and stops. He then hears cars and gets up to run there. He goes and sees teens with their cars. He stops one and tries to tell him what happened and asks to get in the car. The kid doesn't get out or let him in, so he gets frustrated and gets him out of the car. His friends come and get Alan out of the car. Then one of them notices Mandrake. Alan tells them to get into the car and drive off, but Tubbs comes up behind them with the car. Mandrake starts talking to them saying Alan is a bad man, but Alan tells them to not believe him. He's a bad guy and he's going to hurt them too. He says that him being in the car is the only reason that they are alive right now. Alan tells him to drive again, but the car doesn't work. Mandrake asks the kid what he's planning to do now, and they get Alan out of the car. Tubbs takes him away and Mandrake thanks them for understanding. Then he shoots all of them. He returns to the car, and one of the kids gets out of the car and starts running towards the woods. Mandrake shoots behind him, but he runs out of bullets, so he stops and the kid manages to run away. Tubbs goes to the car to check the kids. Alan yells at him, saying he only feels at home in a cage. He thinks that he's free, but he still has his leash on his neck. Tubbs drags him to the car, and they all get in. Tubbs holds the steering wheel, and Mandrake says one last stop and then they'll go to a pub. They drive, and we see them in Hackaway Point. Mandrake stops the car and gets out. He tells Alan that Tubbs will take care of him. He goes to open the shutter and yells at Tubbs to get out. He doesn't move, and Mandrake comes to get Alan, saying fine, he can stay if he wants to. They get inside and start walking around. They get out to the yard and start talking. Alan says he kept asking himself why he didn't do anything. He says it's not cowardliness, because he thought that they deserved it. He says he should have helped him, and it was him. Mandrake says it was someone else if it wasn't Alan. He says the boys were all the same for them, and they are all the same for the boys. Then he shoots him and turns him around with his foot. He notices a rock in his hand, and Alan hits him with it. They start fighting, and Alan manages to get on top of Mandrake. He starts hitting him with the rock and he lays down once he notices he doesn't move anymore. He starts crawling towards the stone the kid engraved with "I hate this place," and Mandrake gets up saying he couldn't remove him. No one can hurt him. He continues to talk and shoot towards Alan, while we see Tubbs walking up to them behind Mandrake. He comes and gets the gun from him. Mandrake talks about how that's it, and Alan's not going to live, but Tubbs shoots him in the head. He then turns to Alan and says he hates this place. He drops the gun next to Mandrake and walks off, leaving Alan there. We see him walking away from the car. We see Mandrake lying on the ground and Alan still lying next to the stone. Then we see Tubbs sitting in a field and crying. The movie ends there.